Good morning, everyone. I'm extremely delighted to be here to reflect with you on how we are already, how we could continue to respond to these moments of disruption. Before we begin our conversation, permit me to just send in the chat a link that will guide you to a small survey to just get the idea on where you are. So I'm posting that in the chat, and please go to that link and just respond to the question. And then together we can see that on the screen, and then I'll begin my conversation from there. Hopefully you can see the little link I have sent. Kindly click on that. And then the question is, what are the top 3 qualities you feel our current time needs? Maybe I should have also insisted on writing leadership qualities. What are the top 3 leadership or personal qualities our current time need?
Martin, if you could maybe resend the link in the chat box, that would be very helpful. Thank you.
And yeah, let me try and send that in the chat. I have just resent. You click on the chat, on the link, you click on the link, and then it will lead you to, oh, sorry, I think it just posted it to one person. It's supposed to go to everyone. Yeah, in the chat there. Thank you. So what we see there are compassion, patience, flexibility, courage and kindness, humility, empathy, action, openness, kindness, resilience, curiosity. Patience. So it gives us a flavor. We are in some way thinking along similar lines, feeling in a similar way about what we need to bring to these unprecedented moments. I will keep that running, and then at some point then I will share with Verena, just in case we would like to get a picture of that and just keep that to remind ourselves. Obviously, we have heard so many times that these are unprecedented times. My guess is that life has forced us to stop, not just because we need to take stock, but also to give us a chance to see if we can cut a new direction. allow me to share some thoughts through slides so that we can just think together that way. So these are moments when we are stepping into the unknown. They are moments of disruption, as I keep saying. So stepping into the unknown quite often involves jumping over, crossing over. We might have a clue where we are coming from. We are less clear about where we are going. And yet, something in us tells us to. But there are also moments when we are forced to jump. What helps is when there is a little bit of light that is guiding. Where we might step is not known. So a big leap from what we know over the chasm into the unknown. In some form, this is what distinguishes leaders from managers. Managers, important as they are, they help us to maintain the status quo. The way things are crafted, they should run as efficiently as possible. And that's an important role. A leadership role which falls on all of us, formal and informal, is that moment when we have to help whatever we are responsible for, whoever we are connected to move from the known to the unknown. Paying attention to whatever little light there might be. But this stepping into the unknown sometimes can be slightly smaller than the first one you saw. It might just be a little step, but it's still into the unknown. And yet it still matters that there are individuals, groups of people that are bothering themselves with thinking about how do we do that? How do we carry everyone? So there are two ways of responding to disruption. We can choose to respond to disruption in what I am referring to as absencing or the presencing cycle. When we are responding from the absencing cycle, we tap into the three core human capacities for knowing and thinking differently. We tap into our closed mind, and quite often driven by ignorance. We work with a closed heart because we are driven by hate. And we function from a closed will because we are operating from fear. But we could also choose to stop downloading patterns of the past and tap into those human capacities differently. We could tap into the open mind, which is driven by curiosity. The ability to lean into accessing our own ignorance, asking questions. What does this mean? Who else is involved? Who else is impacted? Who should we be talking to? What should we be thinking of that we might not be thinking of right now? Why does this matter? What else is possible? The open mind is curious. It doesn't celebrate knowing. It celebrates inquiry, curiosity. We tap into the open heart, which functions at its best with compassion, the capacity to connect with others. We tap into courage, that which enables us to move from intention to action. The absencing cycle leads us to denial. So we start denying what is there. We start denying the pain and suffering of other people. We work with a heart that is not sensitive. And instead of tapping into the three intelligences I talked about, we disconnect with those. The end result is manipulation and blaming of other people, not ourselves. That leads to distraction. On the other hand, when we stop downloading patterns of the past, we begin to see more out of the same reality. We sense more into the root causes of the challenges or opportunities we need to unravel. We let go fear so that we can let come courage. And we tap into our highest potential because we are working with an open mind, open heart, and open will. That is what will give us an opportunity to access new insights that we then experiment with in order to bring about the new by working with other people. When we work from distraction, the end result is trauma. When we work with other people, co-creating future possibilities, we stand a better chance of evolving to the next level of whatever we want to do at personal and collective levels. So the moment we are living in invite us to pay attention to three types of violence. The first one is direct violence. Killing, lynching. We are seeing this in this moment in the example of George Floyd and Arbery in the United States, but also it is a moment of witnessing what the effect of 400 years of racism can be. One blind spot arises from that. Denial, not seeing what is there. We are stuck in one view. Again, as I said earlier on, we are blinded by ignorance and doubt. The second form of violence is structural violence. This is manifested by the shocking levels of inequality. We have seen during this pandemic that as soon as institutions closed, a country as wealthy as this, and we wanted children to learn from home, then we started noticing that there are many homes where there isn't a single gadget that could effectively be used for homeschooling. It is when inequality arising from broken promises leads to what I'm referring to as structural violence. The second blind spot that comes from there is simply the inability for those of us with power, influence, and authority to feel with other people. When we are stuck only in our own skin, we cannot feel for others. The third form of violence is attentional violence. When we do not see other people in their highest future possibility, when we see others only in the current limitations that they are maybe trapped in. When we limit people, not because they are limited, when we limit people because we perceive them that way, we don't see their future potential. At societal level, we can see this. For example, in the United States, one of the wealthiest countries in the world, where education is based still, quality education is still based on who has the capacity to pay. It's unimaginable that such a wealthy nation is incapable, compared to Finland, where they can pay for education for everyone, education that is of high quality. But also I was talking to some of my colleagues on the continent of Africa, for instance, where the violence is not taking form of race. It's taking the form of tribe. It's taking the form of sexism. Attention of violence leads to the third blind spot. Inability to co-create with other people because you are stuck in one identity. Sometimes it is because we are trapped in fear, fear of others. In a way, this disruptive moment is allowing us an opportunity to inquire into this and see whether we can change course. I will stop sharing here now so that we can go into small groups and think together, maybe in trios, Verena, if that is possible. And the question is, what inner resource do we need? Inner resources do we need to respond to the current times? It could also be just also a reflection of some of the thoughts I've shared. And I'm not saying you agree with me, but what stood out for you? What caught your attention? And then we can come back maybe after 15 minutes to listen to your thoughts and reflections as well. Just wanted to go back to, I think the question or comment that was made by Mary, the will, the mind, where does the work begin for leaders? So here is one little perspective, and it's not the only perspective. My guess is this, that we are living at a time when we are confronted by three major issues. We are confronted by the ecological divide, that artificial separation we create between ourselves and nature. And part of what we are experiencing now is our inability to respect the boundaries around our need to satisfy our needs and wants, and what our ecological system needs in order to take care of us. That's how we even cross the line to be in the situation of the pandemic we are grappling with now. The social divide, that artificial separation between ourselves and others. And what, for lack of a better term, I may refer to as spiritual divide, which is simply the separation of self from self, symbolized by the increasing numbers of people impacted by mental health challenges, numbers of people suffering from depression, feeling unfulfilled with life. These, I illustrate them like that but literally they are anchoring on one thing. What we do in the ecological sphere is not separate from what happens in the social divide. What we do in the social divide has an impact on our environment, just like it has an impact on our well-being. It is fine for leaders to try and stamp off those tips we are seeing there, but that's not where leadership work lies. The real leadership work lies what is below the waterline. Like in any iceberg, we only see 10%. 90% is below. My guess is that the work of leaders lies below the waterline. It is going there to look at the structures we have created that produce the results we want or don't want above the waterline. Structures are not an act of God. Structures are human-made. Structures in our healthcare system, we created them. Structures in our education system, we created them. Structures in our economic system, we created them. Sometimes you hear people produce the numbers around GDP as if GDP is an act of nature. No, three men sat together wanting to find a way of measuring the success or failure of nations. And that's why in some parts of the world, they are inquiring into that and saying, this does not represent the values we want to live by. That's why Prime Minister Jacinda in New Zealand said to her team, we are going to measure mental health, well-being as a standard for our progress or lack of it. That's why the small country of Bhutan is no longer measuring GDP. They are measuring gross national happiness. These are structures we have created. But structures don't come by themselves. Structures come from what is between our ears. Our patterns of thinking produce the structures that give us the results we want or don't want above the water. But thoughts also don't happen by themselves. They are inspired by the fundamental beliefs and values we hold. The work of leadership is below the waterline. Ask whether the structures that are in place are serving the world we want to see and to live in. Inquire into the thinking patterns that enable us to make certain structures. A few years ago, you heard BBC confessing that they paid women less than men, even if they were equally qualified and equally capable, same job description, because the thinking was that women were not as capable as men. We have to inquire and poke holes into that. The fundamental beliefs and values we hold matter. In countries where, like we have here, National Health Service, it's because people believe that health cannot be decided upon by capacity to pay. In the United States, it's a different story. But you also find a variation of that in education from one country to the next. The work of leadership is not so much about stamping off those tips of the iceberg. It is asking fundamental questions around our structures, our thinking patterns, and our fundamental beliefs and values. And that's where change comes from. However, in moments like we are now, we need to learn to lead from the gap. You may recognize the gentleman that I'm standing next to. In 2018, I had the opportunity to spend a little bit of time with John Carlin, originally from Scotland. And John is the author of the book on which the movie Invictus is built. John and I shared the platform when we were together in Lisbon to do the celebration of Mandela's 100th birthday. And I had the privilege of learning from John his interactions with Mandela. he told me this story that at one time he was in South Africa. That was just before the very first open and free elections. He was in the same room with Nelson Mandela, with other people, when news was broken that his political son, Chris Hani, had been murdered. John said to me, in that moment, Mandela became like a statue. For as long as 5 minutes, he stood motionless. It was like he was a sphinx. When he came out of that 5 minutes later, he asked that he addressed the nation of South Africa. That's when he gave that 6-minute speech, which saved South Africa from self-destruction through a racial war. I think life has thrown us into a gap now. When John told me about that moment when Mandela separated stimulus from action, he went within. Leaders have to decouple stimulus and response, particularly in moments of disruption, so that they have the chance to go within and fish out different responses that are going to help communities, teams, organizations, and society as a whole create a different path. I don't know what your practices are at a personal, collective level, at your organizational level, that allow you to go within so that you don't respond to disruption from same habits. What are your thoughts? Thank you. Thank you, Drew. Just wanted to read one from Claire. One thing that comes up for me is that my conditioning was to see going within as an intellectual, rational exploration. This is part of it. I've been privileged to expand this so that my heart and my body are part of that inner knowing and that inner work, seeing compassion, love, and patience and courage so clearly in the word cloud at the start that at the start was really strengthening for me. Janet.
Okay, I'm just aware there's people are starting to leave, and in a way it feels like we've started a conversation that it feels tempting to continue, but I think we should draw to a close in that we've finished our assigned time for this morning. I certainly am left with loads to think about from this morning, and I hope that that's been the same experience for others. We've got more sessions with Martin. There's another one later this week and then another 2 next week. So if you haven't yet had the chance to sign up for the other sessions, then please take the opportunity now. Otherwise, thank you very much, everyone, for your participation this morning, and thank you to Martin for hosting the session for us. Go safely and go well, and we'll see you soon. Thank you.